On a warm August morning in 2005, air traffic controllers in Athens stared at a radar screen. A Boeing 737, Helios Flight 522, cruising calmly at 34,000 feet, was flying straight into Greek airspace. But something wasn't right. It wasn't responding. It wasn't changing course. The aircraft remained on autopilot, silent, still. It had been in the sky far too long. So the Greek Air Force scrambled two F-16s, and when the fighter pilots pulled up beside the cockpit, what they saw through the window was something they would never forget. This is the haunting story of Helios 522, a flight that turned into a ghost, and a tragedy no one could stop. And remember, viewer discretion is advised. The plane was a Boeing 737-300, just 7 years old, operated by Helios Airways, a budget airline based in Cyprus. It wasn't brand new, but it was in decent shape. The day before the crash, something odd happened. The previous crew reported a pressurization issue, frozen door seals, and loud noises in the cabin. A ground engineer was called in to investigate. Alan Irwin, Helios Airways chief maintenance engineer. To run the test, he switched the cabin pressurization system from auto to manual. It was a routine procedure, but when the test was over, he forgot to switch it back. The plane flew its next flight with the system still set to manual mode, completely unnoticed. That one detail would become everything.
Mayday, 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 mayday.
We don't handle massive changes in air pressure very well. When you climb a mountain, the air gets thinner, the oxygen less. Your ears pop, your breathing gets heavier. Now, imagine jumping from sea level to the cruising altitude of a jet over 30,000 feet in just 20 minutes. That's what commercial aircrafts do on every flight. But up there, the air pressure is so low, you couldn't survive for long. That's where pressurization systems come in. Modern jets, like the Boeing 737, use a system that takes compressed air from the engines, called bleed air, and feeds it into the cabin. It's not just to keep you comfortable, it's to keep you conscious. Cabin pressure is regulated to simulate an altitude of around 6,000 to 8,000 feet, like you're in a mountain town, not the upper atmosphere. Without this system, your blood oxygen levels start to plummet. Your brain can't function. You get hypoxia, a kind of slow, creeping suffocation. You won't feel it right away. You'll just feel slightly off, maybe a bit warm, a little euphoric. Then confusion starts to set in, disorientation, and eventually you just lose consciousness. And that's exactly what happened on Helios 522. The cabin pressure system had been left in manual mode, but the crew didn't realize it wasn't adjusting as they climbed. No warnings stood out, no alarms screamed oxygen failure. They were simply running out of air, slowly, silently, and they never knew it until it was too late. On the morning of August 14th, 2005, Helios Airways Flight 522 took off from Larnaca, Cyprus, bound for Prague with a stopover in Athens. Shortly after takeoff, as the aircraft began to climb, the pressurization system, still set to manual, failed to adjust. The cabin didn't pressurize at all. As the aircraft rose, the oxygen levels inside the cabin dropped. The crew and passengers slowly lost consciousness from hypoxia, likely without even realizing it. But the aircraft itself, the machine, kept flying. Autopilot was engaged. And Helios 522 flew on, completely unresponsive, straight toward Athens airspace. When air traffic control couldn't get a reply, they scrambled to understand what was happening. Was it a hijacking, a radio failure, a terrorist attack? Greek fighter jets were dispatched to intercept. By this time, the aircraft had reached Athens. And then, it began to circle. It held a pattern near the airport, something jets do when they're waiting for clearance to land, or being guided by autopilot to a missed approach loop. But this wasn't a landing pattern. It was a ghost plane, looping on autopilot, everyone unaware that no one was awake inside. And with each minute it circled, the fuel was running out. When the fighter pilots reached the aircraft, they pulled up alongside the cockpit and saw something chilling. Air traffic control tries again and again.
Helios 522, do you read? Helios 522, do you read? Helios 522, do you read?
No one answers. The Greek military sends up 2 F-16s to intercept. It's been hours now, still no word from the cockpit. At 11:24 a.m., the jets pull up beside the 737. They look inside. The co-pilot is slumped forward, completely unresponsive. The captain's seat is empty. Inside the cabin, passengers still strapped in, oxygen masks hanging, but motionless. Still, not a sound. Some passengers slumped against the windows from what the pilots could see. And then, one of the fighter pilots sees something. Movement. A man steps into the cockpit. He's wearing a flight attendant's uniform. This is Andreas Prodromou. He's just 25 years old, and he's conscious, likely using a portable oxygen bottle. He's not a commercial pilot, but he's had some training, a private license. And now, he's sitting in the captain's seat, trying to save the plane. Fuel is critically low. Autopilot shuts off. One engine flames out. The plane tilts. Then the other flames out. Andreas sends a faint mayday, but it's too late.
Mayday, mayday.
The plane begins a slow spiral toward the hills of Grammatico, and in the distance, the F-16s watch helplessly. There's nothing they can do. At 12:04 p.m., Helios 522 slams into the hillside just 40 kilometers from Athens. The fighter pilots could only watch, powerless. Everyone on board, 121 lives, gone. The crash of Helios Flight 522 shook the aviation world. It wasn't just a mechanical error, it was a failure of systems, procedures, and human oversight. The warning horn that sounds is used for multiple alerts. The sound was identical to the one used for a takeoff configuration error, a serious flaw in design. The captain had contacted Helios ground engineers, reporting what he thought was a cooling system fault and a cabin altitude warning light. In Cyprus and Greece, investigations tore apart every step of the aircraft's preparation and maintenance. Helios Airways faced lawsuits and public outrage. The airline shut down in 2006. Boeing and regulatory authorities updated procedures and training. Warning systems were redesigned to differentiate between pressurization alerts and takeoff errors. And pilots worldwide were reminded, hypoxia doesn't come with fireworks. It comes quietly, with a yawn, with foggy thinking, with silence. But no fix can undo what happened. The image of a silent plane, full of unconscious souls, drifting across the sky while one man fought to bring it home, remains one of the most devastating scenes in aviation history. Eventually, the airline's chief engineer was charged with 121 counts of manslaughter for the deaths of all people on board. He was accused of failing to reset the pressurization system after a routine maintenance check. But years later, the charges were dropped. Not because the tragedy wasn't real, but because the legal system couldn't find a direct, provable link between that mistake and the crash. In the end, it wasn't one person. It was a chain, a sequence of oversights, small errors, and missed signals that cost 121 lives. There was no villain here, no bomb, no hijacker, no drama, just a system setting, and a chain of small decisions that ended in tragedy. But maybe the most haunting image isn't the crash. It's that fighter pilot looking into the cockpit of a drifting plane and realizing there's nothing he can do. If this story gripped you like it did us, consider subscribing for more real-life mysteries from the shadows of history. And drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. This was Phantom Frontiers. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more true stories from the edge of the unknown. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your mind even more so.